In this post-apocalyptic world live hordes of beasts whose only goal is to eliminate humanity so that they can stake their claim to the surface for themselves. Born from underground, they sought to make their presence known, killing off 25% of humanity on the first day of attack alone. This day is known as Emergence Day. In order to prevent further decimation, the Coalition of Ordered Governments, otherwise known as the COG, fought tooth and nail to fend off the constant onslaught of the Locust Horde. Drastic times called for drastic measures, and with that being said, the COG had no choice but to essentially nuke multiple of their own cities in order to just buy themselves more time, sacrificing millions in the process. Fast forward to 14 years after E-Day, we meet our main character, Marcus Phoenix. Him and his childhood friend Dom work together in order to finally put an end to the Locust Horde once and for all. This is Gears of War. Gears of War was my favorite childhood game. Though it was a pretty gory game for a 5-year-old, I still found myself being able to play it. As a kid, I didn't really care much for the story or narrative that was driven, but after replaying the original game countless times, I can now see how the appeal encapsulated the minds of many fans of the franchise through its story, world building, and characters. Sadly, I can't say that the newer games had a similar effect, but I know for a fact that the original trilogy, even Judgment, were games that were known all around the Xbox community and were staples to the 360 era. But what made the original Gears so great? Well, that's what we're going to discuss today. We gotta first talk about the story as well as the world building. Next is the characters and enemies of the game, as well as the weapons in action. Third is of course the multiplayer and how it was completely different and still is different from most if not all multiplayer games. And finally, I will talk about my personal experience with the game. Gears 1 takes place 14 years after E-Day. Our main character, Marcus, has been incarcerated, for reasons we won't get too much into in this video. But anyway, his buddy Dom is there to get him out, because all the prisoners have been pardoned. It becomes obvious that at this point the COG has been running out of soldiers for the war, and seeing as Marcus was originally a sergeant in the past, it is in their best interest to let him out and help. In this game, the objective is simple. Take this thing called the Resonator and deploy it within the Locust turf, so that it can map out their tunnels and give the COG targets to send their bombs. In order to not spoil the game too much, that's about all the context for the story I will be giving. But now let's talk about the world building. There are 5 main areas that the characters traverse through in Gears 1. A city with a stranded civilization, an abandoned emulsion mine, the Locust tunnels, the Phoenix estate, and the train sequence at the end of the game. Technically there is another area, but that was exclusive to the PC at the time and added into the base game later in the Ultimate Edition. So since I didn't play it as a kid, I won't be including it. We see in the first act of the game how the war has taken a toll on the world. Buildings and houses are all destroyed, either from the Locust attacks or from the COG's very own nukes. Incorporate that with subtle lines of lore and COG history.
This building used to be a beautiful place. There's a lot of history here. A lot of lies, too. Well, you've got some nerve, soldier. I know all about your trial.
His trial was a sham, sir.
And you get yourself a game that has the basics for storytelling just by seeing the world. But something happens when it gets dark out in certain parts of the world. Bat-like creatures that crave flesh come out and eat anything that isn't under a light source, adding a different element to the game in order to get the players to be more aware of their surroundings and heightening the tier of difficulty for them. In the third act, we arrive to the abandoned mine shaft, where we are introduced to glowing wretches, little monkey-like animals that we have faced earlier, but only now when they die, they blow up. At this point of the game, there is a sort of fear factor added, the fear of loneliness and darkness. If I had to compare Gears 1 to a horror game, it would have to be the Silent Hill series. The game is scary for literally no reason, even when you are playing 2 players. Sometimes the game even tries to jump scare you. Even the menu screen used to give me nightmares as a kid. Just look how ominous it is. But continuing on, you can see how the devs were able to add certain elements that heighten the overall aspect of the game. After the mine shaft, you enter the locust tunnels, which for the most part is straightforward. Giant cave-like structures that stretch far underground, with seas of what is known as emulsion, a weird yellow substance that is used as fuel. After returning to the surface, you are tasked with traversing to the Phoenix Estate, Marcus' childhood home. The last place you explore in the base game is the train. You and player 2 must make your way to the front in order to put in the codes for the missiles set to destroy the Hollows. There is a sense of urgency and a certain time frame must be met in order to beat the game, so the players must hurry to the front. But don't think that you must only move forward through the game. There are secret cog tags scattered throughout that gives the player an incentive to look around. Now let's officially meet our characters. Marcus Phoenix, a sergeant in the Locust War that found himself disobeying orders that subsequently got him sent to the Slammer. Dominic Santiago, player 2, Marcus' childhood friend who was an integral part to the victory in the Pendulum Wars. The other semi-important characters are Cole and Baird, part of Alpha Squad, who eventually combined into Delta Squad with Marcus and Dom. There are also 2 other characters, Carmine and Kim, but they are considerably more irrelevant in this game. There are 3 difficulty options in Gears 1. Casual, for if you just want to enjoy the story, Hardcore, for a balanced run-through of the game, and Insane, for if you want a real challenge. Obviously, the enemies are a lot tougher the more difficult setting you put on them, so keep that in mind. Throughout their travels, Marcus and Dom encounter many types of enemies. The fodder, known as the Wretches, and the Locust Drones are the main enemies seen. They typically spawn by coming through what's called an emergence hole. Holes that just pop up when they decide it's time to attack. But there's actually a speedrun strat for these holes. Just chuck a grenade into them and boom, killed off all the enemies for that round. Later in the game they introduce a more hardened Locust Drone called Theron Guards. They are essentially bullet sponges that wield torque bows, a crossbow-like weapon that fires explosive bullets that one-shot the player. Also one of the coolest weapons in the game. The player also faces an enemy called the Boomer. Not Boomer, but Boomer. They fire a gun that sends explosions directly to where you're standing. But thank the heavens that they say boom every time they are about to drop the bomb. Now there are 3 main bosses in the game. The first, and honestly the one that literally gave me nightmares, is the Berserker. The only female species of the Locust. Don't ask me how they reproduce. They are blind and see only by hearing and smelling their surroundings. Their skin is essentially armor and can't be pierced through with the average gun. Therefore the Hammer of Dawn is required to defeat them. Every time I went up against them as a kid, I would make sure to have my brother or my dad playing with me, because I was so scared of them. Like I said, Gears 1 was essentially a horror game. The second boss is called the Corpser, a giant spider-like enemy that follows Delta Squad through the former half of the game. But once you actually face the boss, it is extremely easy, unless you play on insane mode. The last boss you face is General Rom, who is the main antagonist of Gears 1. His ideology is that if you cut off the head of the snake, the body will die. Therefore, he makes it his goal to kill off the leader of any COG forces so that the rest of the units won't have any guidance on what to do. At the end of the game, he guards the front of the train wielding a modified handheld turret. Not only that, but he has the ability to command the Krill, the bat-like creatures from Act 2. The objective is to stay in the light and pelt him with all the explosives you have in your arsenal. Speaking of which, it's time to talk about the more iconic features of Gears. If I am being honest, Gears of War is kind of a niche game in comparison to other more popular titles. The fanbase is no longer in its prime also. However, one thing that the casual gamer will know about Gears of War is the iconic chainsaw gun, known as the Lancer in-game. Even my PlayStation Pony friend, Redley Gaming, acknowledges that he used to enjoy just chainsawing enemies back in the OG Gears era. We even see iterations of the gun make appearances in movies. So even though Gears isn't as known in the gaming community, at least it has a staple weapon that is recognized by people all around the world. Not only that, but there were a plethora of ways to eliminate your enemies. Shotgun blast, arrow explosions, sniper headshots, rocket explosions, turret pummeling, grenade explosions, curb stomps, and most importantly,
Nakasambody, fuck you back.
did I mention that Gears also had a gore factor that rivaled that of Mortal Kombat?
Shit, he's gone.
One more thing before moving on. Though it's not known for it, the Gears soundtrack absolutely smacks. It gives the player the intensity needed for battling the Locust. Just listen to how hard it be going. Another way that Gears is unique is the multiplayer. At the time Halo was popping off, Microsoft wanted another Xbox staple to be added to their catalog. Gears did things different from the games like Halo or Call of Duty. No matter what, Gears has always stayed boots to the ground, no space jumping whatsoever. Even their running animations were different. But the get behind cover playstyle proved to be a unique mechanic for gamers, so it set way for fast-paced Gnasher battles and utilized wall jumping. Often you will see a battle that lasts a good 20 seconds because the players are both moving at fast speeds, so it made for a fun competitive game mode. Not only that, but power weapons were placed randomly in maps in order to get players to move around. But similar to other games, there was bound to be a toxic player. But that's why the curb stomp existed. But that being said, it gives that player incentive to target you and get that back in blood. The multiplayer was also known for its useful and goofy glitches. Fan of the franchise, Moist Critical, actually had his upbringing through Gears. Check out what he has done in the past. Alright, now, my personal and childhood experience with the game. Obviously, if you can tell, I grew up on Xbox, therefore I played games that were exclusive to it like Halo and Gears, but none really resonated with me like how Gears did. Like other people, I simply just had fun chainsawing the grubs. So much so that I would replay the story multiple times. I typically played with my brother, and even my dad whenever he was available. It's funny because my older brother would always let me get player 1 because he wanted to play as Dom. He was his favorite character. And in my opinion, he is the best player 2 character in all of gaming. I dare you to name someone that's better. You know how they say alcohol is a gateway drug? Well, you can say Gears was that drug that really got me into video games. From there, I went on to play Halo 2, and on my GameCube I played games like Metroid Prime. Shooter/story games were my favorite. But in conclusion, no matter how many people see the new games as, I will always defend the OG trilogy and how Gears revolutionized third-person shooters, especially seeing as that Gears is also considered Souls-like. Thank you everyone for watching. As stated in my last Hollow Knight video, I wanted to switch things up, not just focus my channel on one specific game, but multiple. Maybe I can build a community that talks about various different titles that don't get enough attention. But if you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and comment what you think, and subscribe if you aren't already. It'll help grow my small channel. And like always, I will see you all in the next video. Babbage out.